Game development is a field that offers immense opportunities and prospects. However, it also requires significant investments of time, effort and money, often with unpredictable results for your labor. Game development is challenging, yet it's incredibly interesting, tedious, enjoyable, stifling, irritating, inspiring. It is emotional. Hi, I'm Rotwell. For the past 10 years, I've been an aspiring indie developer. So far, I haven't released a single finished project that could be called a complete game. But all these years, I've been striving towards one single goal: to create a good, fun game. Initially, I started with Unreal Development Kit 3, then moved on to Unreal Engine 4, and now I'm working with Unreal Engine 5. Unfortunately, I was never particularly talented in mathematics, physics or similar subjects. But fortunately, Unreal Development Kit 3 existed at that time, showing user-friendly science. The number of tutorials was increasing, channels were growing, and the quality of the material improved. Inspired by the growing popularity and lowering barrier to entry for indie development, I launched my own YouTube channel. The tutorials I made were of medium to low quality, but during their creation and after publishing them, reading feedback and engaging in discussions, I gained a lot of enjoyment and motivation to continue my journey towards my dream. This continued until my second year of university, when I found my first job. I got a job and trained as a 3D animator. I was fascinated by animation and the magic I could now create with anything and anyone in a scene. At that point, I put indie development on hold indefinitely. But then university ended and my job became unfulfilling and turned into a routine. I needed to find my goal in life again, and it didn't come to me. Nothing comes to us just like that. Only we ourselves, with our own hands, create goals and strive towards them, even those goals that are not yet visible to us. That's how it happened with me. One day I stumbled upon a gaming forum, got inspired by the local contests and decided to give it a try. The first two projects for the contests received a lot of criticism. Meanwhile, I got motivated to become better and thus prove wrong those people who said I wouldn't succeed. And once again, this time, wholeheartedly, I immersed myself in indie development, and I'm still in it to this day. Now that we've gotten acquainted, it's time to move on to the main topic. Why have I been going on about myself for so long? What's the purpose of this prelude? You need the context so that I could tell you that I finally did it. Well, almost. And I want to mark this period of time with this video. Along the way, I'll talk about the challenges and delights I encountered while developing a full-fledged first-person action RPG from scratch. Let's start with the concept. I like FromSoftware games, not just the Souls games. I really like FromSoftware games. I'm the type of player known as an explorer. Such players love to explore locations, not just for loot, but for lore, narrative, and simply for the joy of discovery. Since 1994, FromSoftware has consistently created games that greatly encourage such players. Of course, they didn't invent dungeon crawlers, but they made them real-time, fully 3D, and with accessible controls. Action, simple but much more dynamic than, for example, the turn-based games of those years. Moreover, for some, some this is a plus and for others a minus, Kingsfield features a simple RPG system. There is no grindy complexity or variability in building damage, applying buffs and debuffs. Everything is simplified and streamlined. You can tank through the entire game without ever using weapon skills, or you can complete it without using magic, which is harder but doable. In short, it's the perfect candidate for a first project that isn't overly simple but also not impossible to realize. So I decided to recreate Kingsfield 2 in Unreal Engine 5. Wait, what about originality? What about the rights to the content? You can't sell this. Didn't you want to create something of your own? How can you justify copy? It's not a complete copy. Yes, I aim to fully replicate all the mechanics of Kingsfield. Yes, I didn't go for modern graphics, instead sticking with FromSoftware style, but I don't have the original source code. I'm not a programmer and I'm an amateur, as you remember. The main goal of this project isn't money, not to showcase my skills in drawing, modeling, etc. My goal is to prove that with my current skills in all game development areas, I can produce a finished product, a full slice of a game that's no worse and in some aspects better than the original made by an entire studio. A studio that is currently one of the leaders in Japanese game development and among the top in global popularity. Not to mention that I'm just a fan of these old games and want to express my gratitude for the emotions they gave me during the playthroughs. Alright. The goal is set, let's move on to the development. Content preparation. First, I prepared the content. Using the available modding tools for Kingsfield, I managed to extract all the necessary models for monsters, items and complete first level of the game, as well as the sounds and music. Environment. I imported the level into Unreal Engine. All the models needed to be rescaled to fit Unreal units. After some tweaking, I realized that dealing with the environment textures would be a headache. Making invisible walls and traps seemed especially challenging since the seams were visible. So I decided to create a shader with a triplanar material that maps to the model in global coordinates. This way, all textures were evenly distributed across the level mesh, making hidden passages indistinguishable. For the hidden passages, I wrote additional logic for a smooth transition to a texture in local coordinates. Lighting. I turned off lumen and adjusted the global light. I fine-tuned the colors since the location is set at night. Given the small size of the area, I needed to reduce the player's visibility radius. I tweaked the fog settings to achieve a clear image around the player and a shadowy distance, which looked pretty good overall. However, the caves still lacked adequate lighting. According to the story, there are still inhabited places here with living people. So I decided to model torches and campfires. This added light, color and variety to the locations. It also helped indicate where people or partially people had been recently and where no one had lived for a long time, with monsters roaming everywhere. The original game didn't have such lighting, but now we can show that this is literally dark fantasy. We're exploring abandoned caves and underground camps, full of crazed soldiers, etc. I added a glow around the player, as FromSoftware did. I also spent a lot of time creating this well with healing water, inspired by the reflection and lighting effects in the recent game Lunacid. Additionally, some items like magical crystals and lamps needed to be highlighted. The special feature of the crystal material using a parallax node, it gives a semi-transparent effect with an internal structure. As for the lamps, I set up this specific type of lighting. Interactive objects. Doors, traps, hidden doors, chests, levers, objects with descriptions, signs and NPCs are all included. There's also a unique object, water gates. The doors vary from double doors 2 large stone doors, hidden doors and secret stashes, essentially small hidden doors. In most cases, I used carves instead of pre-recorded animations. These carves can be modified, allowing changes to the duration and animation itself. For the lever and the spear trap, I created skeletal animation. For the floor traps, the top layer of dirt appears to crumble when they activate. AI. This system underwent the most revisions. There were many challenges, and along with creating animations, this took up the majority of the demo's development time. I created the animations for the monsters and the hero from scratch, and all the project's animations for that matter. This is a time-consuming process, but as I mentioned before, I have experience in 3D animation, so I methodically created rigs and simple animations in the spirit of the original. There were issues with procedural limb animations for the Kraken and Head Eater. We'll discuss them later. Let's talk about the general intelligence of the enemies before diving into the specifics of each one. Enemies can roam around the area. If they hear the player, they will look in their direction. If they see the player, they will start to attack and pursue. When an enemy takes damage, they stagger. However, as in the original, you can't stagger them at any time. There is a window during the attacks when staggering is not possible. When staggered, the player can move around the enemy, interrupt their attack startup, and so on. Each enemy has different attributes, movement speeds, and attack logic. One tactic won't be effective against all of them. Now about each separately. Skeletons. The skeletons require the most manual animation work. Their movement is a half root motion. Full root motion looked slow, jerky and static, and I didn't want to spend a few more weeks perfecting the animation, refining it and adding all the transitional animations, like walking to running, idle to strafe, or running a back transitions. I tried to emphasize their boniness with awkward steps and a shake at the end of each step. Skeletons can block attacks. This significantly reducing damage, it making them seem like taught opponents. However, the attack radius is small, making it relatively easy to dodge and get around them. Slimes. The hardest part about the slimes was implementing their shader. I wanted the slime form to not be static. I even tried making the slime stretch towards the player with vertex displacement, but that didn't work out. Instead, I simplified it. Globally, the slime shader has noise. As the slime moves, its form changes. Additionally, I added local vertex displacement. Slimes don't attack on their own, they just slowly move towards the player. If the player steps on the slime, he starts taking damage. However, slimes have hidden feature, like in the original, snails. The snails are the most ambiguous enemy. Initially, I also used root motion for them, but it became clear that the rooms where snails appear were too small for the turn animation I had prepared. They also passed through each other and the player. This still happens, but much less frequently and more controllably. I switched them to regular animation control. They attack with some kind of poison very actively and painfully. They also hit hard in close combat. However, if you get to their side, they become helpless. Fish. The fish are the most challenging enemies. They are very fast and their attacks are only predictable. However, in shallow water, they pose no threat to the player, giving the player a window to attack. The fish AI is unique, especially in how they move in water and on land. I rewrote it many times and even downloaded a special plugin for 3D pathfinding. However, this plugin bugged out specifically with the fish. Dragonflies. For them, I used a pathfinding plugin. Overall, the AI is also unique, but their behavior is not much different from regular enemies. They fly around until they spot the player, then attack. I made their tail movements smooth using logic in the control rig, krakens and head-eaters. These enemies share procedural walking animations. During development I tried several approaches, and the most realistic, though also the most performance intensive, is in the current project. I followed these tutorials. In the second tutorial it turned out great, in that all the code is in the control rig. However, the legs behaved strangely and lifted off the ground when they shouldn't, messing up the tempo. All legs could lift simultaneously, etc. With the current walking setup the legs behave well. Krakens have side attacks, while head-eaters only have a front attack, which is quite large. Both enemies also have an AoE attack. Boss. I won't spoil the boss, I'll just say that overall it has several simple attacks and simple AI that stays in one place. I tried to make it a true boss. In the original it was just an oversized kraken. RPG system. Finding the enemy stats, except for their attacks, player progression and item stats, wasn't too difficult. All this information is available in the translated Kingsfield guides. However, figuring out the damage formula, considering resistances and player upgrades, was quite challenging. I'm still not entirely confident in its accuracy, but it seems to work. I also wrote the logic for enemies and players taking damage, as well as the various effects from using consumables. UI. Until now I hasn't created a full-fledged menu system with submenus, item transfers within the inventory and application. I added a settings plugin, but it caused issues, so I removed the key bindings. I had to create half of the settings from scratch and spend a lot of time modifying the rest to fit the style and adding sound effects. Configuring gamepad controls in the menu was particularly painful, as focusing on buttons required specifying tracking and setting tracking limits manually via blueprints. Magic system. I added a magic system. The demo currently features only 2 combat spells, but I tried to make them both visually appealing and effective. I aimed to differentiate them somewhat, as in the original, Windcutter was clearly superior. Quest system. I created a separate quest class where you can specify quests, objectives, dialogues and add unique logic if necessary. Additionally, I made an NPC class to assign these quests to, filtering based on the quest state and whether the dialogues have been read. The project is currently in a stage of very close testing, meaning I'm having my friends play the demo and fixing the bugs we find. I plan to release the demo for public access on itch.io in June, regardless of whether I manage to polish it as much as I'd like. Everyone, I would greatly appreciate your engagement with this video, and if you could share information about this project with interested friends. Thank you for your support. Rest assured, your support is one of the crucial factors that motivate enthusiasts like me to spend countless hours to deliver anticipated projects that otherwise might never see the light of day. I'm not saying goodbye. Demo release in June. Let's go.